Hi, I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and I want to very cordially welcome you to day 3 of Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart, our 3-day training event. Just to recap where we've come from on this journey in the past 2 days. First, we started with day 1, Data Center Go-to-Market 101. Then we talked about how data center sales has changed, and we gave you some tools and methodologies and best practices to assess if your team is ready for today's global data center marketplace or whether you're living in the past. And then on day 1, we also talked about some methodology around inbound and outbound, specifically targeting marketing and selling to CTOs, chief technology officers, and CIOs, chief information officers, specifically targeted towards data center go-to-market professionals. What did we talk about in day 2? What did we talk about yesterday at Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart? Day 2 was all about lead generation. How do we get the early signs of life that you'll have prospects and future clients at some stage in your sales funnel, at some stage on your deals board? So day 2 was all about lead generation 101, lead generation 201, the more intermediate level topics focusing on helping you get to the right decision makers and larger sales. And we wrapped up day 3 by talking about some more advanced strategies that you can use with data center lead generation 301. So what's on the agenda for day 3? We're going to talk about 2 main areas. First, how to close sales faster, 5 ways to close sales faster with your data center leads. And then we're going to spend the balance of most of today actually on finding the right data center niches and avoiding commoditization. And in between those 2 segments, we're also going to have some special guests dropping in from select excerpts from the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. We'll have experts from major data center operators from all over the US, from all over the globe to give you advice on leveling up with your data center go-to-market. Just a quick introduction if this is your first time, if this is your first day here. I am Joshua Feinberg, founder and CEO of DCSMI, help go-to-market teams in and around the data center industry, ecosystem, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities differentiate, get found much earlier on in buyers' journeys, achieve trusted advisor status, and help protect their margins, help protect their profitability so they can scale successfully. I also host the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. We're just wrapping up season 2 now. You can see some of the guests that have appeared on season 1 and season 2. We're deep into actually recording season 3 already. You can see the names of some of the industry-leading companies that have appeared or will be appearing in past or in upcoming Data Center Go-to-Market episodes. Because you have joined us live for Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart, just a heads up, if you or someone on your team you think would make a fantastic guest for an upcoming episode, feel free to drop me an email or send me a message on LinkedIn. We're always on the lookout for really interesting guests to have in upcoming episodes. I can't guarantee that we can accommodate everyone that asks, but we'll sure as heck take a look, and we put extra weight on that because we know that you're investing the time in leveling up in your professional development around data center go-to-markets. You may have seen me speak at some of the industry's more popular conferences. I've been involved with a number of IT and entrepreneurial related organizations over the years. In addition to spending most of my career working with small businesses, startups, and scale-ups, I've also been fortunate to have some enterprise contractor roles very early on in my career with IBM, more mid-career with Microsoft, been heavily involved with HubSpot's channel partner ecosystem for the better part of a decade. I actually came across colocation data centers in the early 2010s. I'd been working with managed service providers throughout the past 12 or 15 years, originally starting with as a contributing editor for a trade publication, and then did some work for Microsoft's small business server team and channel partner teams, the direct access teams at Redmond, Washington, and their headquarters on channel partner enablement tools and some product marketing initiatives, and then continued with that training over 2,000 small business IT service providers, managed service providers, consulting firms, all over the globe. And what I saw was as most entered the early 2010s, a lot were struggling with reinventing their business model as they were moving from premise-based client server to more SaaS and cloud. The ones that had figured it out, the ones that were doing a really good job of pivot, were going in one of three directions. About a third of them were moving up into mid-market clients in something related to ERP, enterprise resource planning, or something very, very similar to that. Another third got involved in being custom software developers. They were building web apps and mobile apps. And about the other third that really, really resonated with me is they were getting involved deep into infrastructure. So they got involved in colocation. They took a server, they put it in a colocation facility, and they rented out slices of that colocation server to their existing fractional CTO clients. In some cases, they might have had a really progressive client or two who'd go to like a manufacturing conference or a hospitality conference, and they'd come back and they'd say, gee, we have no idea what it means to co-locate a server, but we were told we need to do that. You're our fractional CTO. You go figure out what that means, get us signed up, and just tell us what it's going to cost and how to do that. So that was my first brush into the space. And I understood it reasonably well because I'd been working with web hosts and cybersecurity and IT service and support firms over the years, but it took probably a good 2 or 3 years after that till I really understood the full ecosystem, all the facilities companies, all the construction, the real estate, all the different kinds of investors that get involved in critical facilities and digital infrastructure, as well as the very interesting, very unique outsourced sales and marketing ecosystem. And then there's all the operators, the colocation, the wholesale, the edge, the modular, and of course, the hyperscale. So I often tell people when they're brand new to the industry, it's almost like you need a concierge or a tour guide to take you on a tram ride around the amusement park to give you a little bit of a taste of what it's all about, or a hop-on, hop-off bus tour in a major city to point out the 50, 55, 52, 55, 57 different business models that comprise the data center ecosystem, critical facilities, and digital infrastructure. Over at DCSMI, we're all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. So first up, we are going to talk about 5 ways to close sales faster with your data center leads. And whenever we are planning content like this, we always want to make sure that we get your exact what's top of mind for you in your own words. This is an incredibly powerful way of driving customer insight that will power all of your website copywriting, all your product marketing, all your sales enablement, making sure that your educational resources and your educational events really, really resonate. So whenever we ask people about what their biggest challenges are when it comes to closing sales, closing more sales faster, we hear challenges around lead gen, getting customers aware of our products available, attracting data center clients, finding the right contact, inventory, pricing, changing very traditional industries, transformation, breaking through various barriers. So we're really curious about what do you see as your biggest challenges when it comes to closing sales? I would ask you to please drop that in the chat pane so we can get an idea of where you're struggling with the most and what you're looking for the most help with when it comes to closing sales with your data center leads. So in terms of 5 strategies, 5 best practices that you can put to work to start moving the needle on your client growth, on your pipeline growth, on your company's revenue growth, we're going to talk about 5 very specific areas in terms of providing an excellent user experience while you're prioritizing your growth goals, segmenting the importance of segmentation and personalization, using your marketing and sales team members to deliver timely educational resources, using social proof that eliminates some of the most common friction points, and building a webinar and events program that educates and builds trust. And then we'll introduce you to some recommended resources to go along with that. To put it all in context, what we're all working towards and why there's so much opportunity and yet so much chaos going on in this amazing industry right now, Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, forecasted a little while back that NVIDIA sees $1 trillion in data center upgrades happening over the next 4 years. $1 trillion over the next 4 years, starting with all the hyperscalers and trickling on down to the rest of the industry. And Jensen Huang's good friend Michael Dell is also incredibly bullish about what's going on in the data center ecosystem. Michael Dell predicts 100-fold increase in data center demand over the next 10 years. And you can see a little more recently, Elon Musk is making some amazingly huge bets on AI and digital infrastructure. And even more recently, ExxonMobil just recently announced getting into the business of powering, providing that extra power for data centers. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on in this space right now. The challenge, however, is we don't think that everyone's going to get to participate as democratically, as evenly as they might like to. And there's a couple of reasons. Some of those reasons have to do with your existing capital, your existing resources, your existing product, your services, your team capabilities. Some of the other reasons, however, are totally within your control and within the scope of what we're talking about at Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart. See, one of the big things to keep in mind is over the past 10 years, your buyers have changed. And it's not just that they want a lot more density. It's not just that they're way more into artificial intelligence and high performance computing and supercomputing than they ever have been. They've actually changed their purchasing habits. It used to be 10 years ago, your prospects and clients would start talking with members of your sales team when they were about halfway through the sales cycle, halfway through their purchase decision. In the mid-2010s, that number was about 56%. Corporate Executive Board CEB, that's now owned by Gartner, at the time found about 56% of a typical buyer's journey was over before vendor contact, before sales contact. That number 10 years later has accelerated way to the right. And we now find that 83% of a typical buyer's journey is over before sales contact, before vendor contact. What caused these massive changes? Well, for one, a lot of baby boomers have retired. Second, a lot of millennials and Gen Z are now in decision-making roles. It was 10 years of digital transformation and millions of people working from home for a few years in the beginning of the 2020s. And this isn't just edge cases. This isn't just people at the fringes. This is nearly everyone. McKinsey found that 70, 80% of decision makers now prefer to make decisions digitally. So if we want you to be able to have surface area, footprint, get found early on, when you have a chance to really influence the purchase criteria, we really need to keep the full buyer's journey in mind. The buyer's journey is the active research process that someone goes through between being a complete stranger and their purchase decision. And most industry analysts find that there's about 25 to 30 individual touch points that happen in between when someone first figures out that they have a goal or a challenge they're trying to figure out and when they buy your company's products or services. I think 28 is the most recent number. 28 individual touches need to happen that they go through in between when they first have something they need to figure out or a problem they're trying to solve and when they make a purchase decision. The challenge is most companies in and around data centers, digital infrastructure, critical facilities right now are only showing up at the end. They're only showing up in the decision stage when a lot of the brand loyalty, a lot of the education and trust building has already happened in the awareness and the consideration stages. And this is a huge problem, but it's also a really, really big opportunity for those of you that are with us at this 3-day training event, Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart. Why? Because with some simple tweaks in your positioning and your prioritization and how you present yourself, your prospects and clients, you can really crush it. But for many companies, this is a big culture change. So the question is, how many touch points do you currently have with your ideal clients, with your ideal prospects in between complete stranger and purchase decision? If you think about those 28 touch points, do you have at least 28 touches that you're getting to with that person when they're in the awareness stage, when they're doing self-guided research? Do you have at least 11 or 12 touches in the middle of the sales cycle, in the middle of the buyer's journey, when they're starting to compare at a broad level all the different options that are in front of them? And most of you are probably doing okay in the decision stage. These are people that are ready to buy. The problem is if you only meet them when they're ready to buy, there's a really good chance that one of your competitors has stacked the decks in their favor and put you in a near impossible position to be able to win from unless you undercut on price. And we all know that undercutting on price is a race to the bottom. It's demoralizing for your team. It causes all kinds of financial problems for your company. So we want to make sure that you're able to get in there early and get in there often to spend a lot of, or ideally most of those 28 touch points with your ideal clients and prospects. Because when you do that, you are nearly guaranteeing that you stay on the short list. When you do this exceptionally well, your competitors, your direct competitors, your indirect competitors, even your non-business model competitors will start to fall off the short list because your prospects and clients are spending so much time with members of your client-facing team, learning from them, getting all these amazingly helpful insights for who they are, what their company does, where they're located, their company size, and what their particular job role is. They're learning so much from them that there's really no time or no reason for them to look elsewhere. And again, a lot of companies in this space spend a huge portion of their overall budget on massive national or global conferences, one or two touch points. And you could have this terrific, really, really lots of fun golf tournament or cabana party poolside. But the problem is each of those only counts for one or two touch points. What are you going to do to make sure that you're in there for the other 24 touch points that really count? Because it's probably not very likely that your best prospects and clients are going to wait another 362 days or another 364 days for you to sponsor that major event next year. Almost certainly, they're going to accelerate when it matters to them. So are you going to be in there early enough to have trained them to know that you're the only one to go to for this, or are you going to leave it to chance? So what can we do to contextualize and prioritize around this? First, we need to think about both product market fit and go-to-market fit. Product market fit is the degree to which you know exactly who your ideal clients are, exactly the products and services that they purchase from your company, at what price points, at what durations, at what frequencies. And most of all, this also helps you fill in the blanks with your unit economics on things like cost of acquisition, sales cycle length, annual recurring or monthly recurring revenue, lifetime value, margins, all that good stuff. Go-to-market fit means that you have extreme clarity on product market fit, and you know with a very high degree of confidence that when your investors or your board come in and says, here's another million, here's another 5 million, here's another 10 million, whatever, to invest in growth, that you know that you're going to have predictable outcomes. In order for you to be super successful in closing sales faster, it's really important not just to understand who they are and what's going on in their mind, but to understand where they are in their journey, both with and without your company, both independently and in their relationship with your company. And there's a couple different frameworks to keep in mind with all of this. We've been talking so far about the buyer's journey as the active research process that someone goes through on their own on a self-propelled basis that at some point may bring them to your front door, either physically or virtually at the decision stage. For a lot of companies, they tend to track life cycle stage in their CRM and their customer relationship management software as a way to track the relationship that someone has with your company. Some simple life cycle stages that you may be familiar with are like lead, marketing qualified lead, sales qualified, opportunity, customer, other, evangelist. These are very, very popular ways among marketing operations and sales operations folks to understand in your CRM where someone is in their relationship with your company. Is there a direct one-on-one relationship, linear relationship between buyer's journey stage and life cycle stage? Usually. Your mileage may vary a little bit, but generally subscribers and leads are in the awareness stage, marketing qualified and sales qualified leads. They're paying a lot more attention now to solutions categories. So accordingly, you're paying a lot more attention to them. And at the decision stage, these are usually opportunities and customers. Deal stage tends to be a subset of the opportunity lifecycle stage. In other words, it's a more granular way of tracking how far along an ideal client is progressing towards potentially becoming a new customer, becoming a new source of revenue. Deal stages are a tricky area for a lot of sales teams as they're building out a sales process because it needs to be a verifiable and inspectable step that your prospects take on their part, on their own, through their own action, not what you'd like those actions to be, but what those actions actually are. And that makes an enormous difference of how you position yourself going forward, as opposed to just thinking of yourself as a seller to someone that's more like a project manager or a quarterback that helps drive internal alignments among the internal champion and all the other stakeholders within their company, with all the other members of the decision committee that matter. Another really important framework to think about when it comes to accelerating more leads into clients is the handoff that you go through between leads going from marketing to sales. And there's a whole separate handoff that's super important too when you go from sales to account managers or sales to customer success. At the early stages, your company needs to be really, really clear, really, really good alignment about how and when leads should be passed from marketing to sales teams and under what kind of conditions. And this usually gets decided based on a couple of different factors. For most companies, it's usually a combination of fit and interest. By fit, how good of a fit does this company look like compared to your ideal client profile that you've defined? Are they in the right geographic area? Are they big enough but not so big? Are they in the right kind of industry? Those are generally company type of fit indicators. And there's also the people indicators. So drilling into below the accounts, you have the individual stakeholders. These are your buyer personas. So to what extent did this kind of job function, their job role, line up with what you consider your most important and second most important kinds of stakeholders to be in on these conversations? Those are degrees of fit. Then there's also degrees of interest. You could have someone from a fantastic company that's the perfect kind of stakeholder, but if they're not interested in talking to you and they're not interested in this category, that's a nice person to potentially keep trying to get in front of on an ongoing basis, but it's not going to be a terribly productive conversation because they're not ready to prioritize this kind of goal or this kind of challenge yet. In a perfect world, your sales team would spend 100% of their time with leads that are showing very high signs of interest or intent in purchasing your kind of product or service, and they're the perfect fit. The challenge is not everyone is in that perfect quadrant. So as you see up there, we have 4 different quadrants where in a perfect world, they have very high fit, very high interest. That's where you hand off immediately to sales. They're a perfect bullseye in your ideal client profile. It's a primary or secondary buyer persona. They're consuming so much great content of yours or attending your great events. That should go immediately to sales. If you have the opposite extreme, where they're not a good fit, they're in the wrong country, they're too small, the company's too big, it's too small, it's the wrong industry, they're the wrong kind of stakeholder, that's where you provide kind of group resources. And then you have these potentially gray areas where there are really good fits, but they're not showing high signs of interest. That's where you nurture them, or they're super interested, but they're not a great fit. That's where you move into more order taker kind of role. But these are really important conversations to have with your account executives, your sales development reps, your marketing folks, your account managers, to make sure that you have clarity on these kinds of decision points. So this is one of the ways that you can provide an excellent prospect, an excellent customer experience while still prioritizing your growth goals. Next up, let's talk a little bit about segmentation and personalization. This is a really important area as well, and it's become super critical in the last 10 years because there's so much now competing for the attention of your prospects and clients. That's why when you hear me talk about a competitive analysis, we don't just look at direct competitors, the ones that torture your sales team at the bottom of the sales funnel, where you're always duking it out at the last minute to figure out if they're going to go with you or not. Indirect competitors, usually you're talking to similar clients, but either their company is much bigger or much smaller than yours, or they're not quite in the same geographic coverage that you have. Non-business model competitors are a super interesting third category that catches almost everyone off guard. These are other companies, channel programs, events, media companies that create content on topics that are super interesting and events that are super interesting to your ideal clients, to your perfect buyer personas, but they don't do the same thing that you do. And in the battle for winning people's attention, earning their ability to educate and build trust with them throughout the full buyer's journey, these non-business model competitors can be just as much a thorn in your side. So how do we make sure that we equip you with the right tools, process, and mindset to tackle this? To provide a world-class customer experience, you really need a way to segment your leads and personalize to who they are and where they are at scale. Some of the most important ways to think about this is who the buyer persona is. In other words, what they care about, what their biggest goals and challenges are, what's top of mind for them, having that extreme empathy about who they are and what they're going through, as well as where they are in their stage between awareness and consideration and decision. Again, all too often, most companies that are relatively new to what we're talking about at Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart put all of their efforts, or nearly all of their efforts, into people that are at the decision stage. And when you do so, it often comes across as totally tone deaf. This is like going on a date with someone that you just met, and you're like, hey, I know I met you 5 minutes ago, but what do you think of eloping? What do you think of getting married today? It's a funny romantic comedy, right? But doesn't really happen in real life 9 times out of 10, except in extremely unique circumstances. Same thing if you went to go look at buying or renting a new home, or purchasing or leasing office space, or purchasing or leasing a car. If the person that you're talking to is trying to high pressure you into closing you on that first visit, not a great experience. But conversely, when you're looking for general information and you're just learning, you're at the early stages of learning about how you could potentially achieve a goal or close a gap or solve a really nagging problem that's stressing you out, that's screwing up your work-life balance, that's messing up your vacation times. It's important to be able to find those resources as well. So we need to be able to contextualize, we need to be able to segment and personalize for who they are and where they are. Some of the big factors that are making this even more urgent are hyper competition, globalization, commoditization, and technology-driven disruption. And all you really need to do is spend a few minutes with me and see how globally diverse the kinds of guests that I have on the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast are, from literally multiple continents, from a dozen different time zones, and you realize just how global the world is now and how small the world is now with connecting everything together. So as much as it's awesome that you can potentially have clients all over the globe, depending on your business model, it also introduces competition from literally all over the globe. So to segment properly, we need to know who they are, their persona. We need to know their life cycle stage, where they are in their relationship with your company. And we should be watching for behavioral triggers. And if you see that adorable young girl on the right there, it kind of that looks like she's screaming. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Veruca Salt character from the Willy Wonka movies, from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movies. If that's one of your favorite iconic movies, let me know in the chat pane. But what's super interesting about Veruca Salt is she doesn't care how, she just wants it now. And first it was like golden gooses laying eggs and all the children, and the interesting message with that movie and that book and everything is a lot of what trips up most of the kids is they can't control their emotions. But in her particular case, she doesn't care how, she just wants it now. This is the toddler attention span. So the question is, have we moved into a world now with the TikTokification of the world, where people want to watch videos that are less than 59 seconds long, where we all need to adjust to this to a certain degree? In terms of behavioral triggers, what are some of the things that you can watch for and that you can adjust and allow you to improve your personalization and segmentation? Websites of certain strategically important pages, form submissions of certain strategically important lead generation offers, engagement at an event like a webinar, email opens, hitting a strategically important website page. Those are really important behavioral triggers that you should be able to monitor for and proactively, reactively react to using your marketing and sales technology tools. For example, for many SaaS companies, they've been doing this for a decade or more. So if this is new, that this capability even exists, pay close attention to it, because you're more than likely playing catch up. But if there's a certain page on your website, like a pricing page or request a quote or something, and a known lead visits that, for like a decade or more, SaaS companies and broader technology companies will immediately send internal notifications to the assigned account executive and their team lead to let them know that a highly prioritized contact is on your website and just looked at a really important page. And that kind of lead will typically get really high opportunity. By the way, what I described to you, just if it sounds like science fiction, I can assure you that it's not. This capability has existed for more than a decade. And if your sales team does not have this capability to react competitively, they're really like having their hands tied behind their back. So it's for sure something that you should look into implementing sooner rather than later. In terms of email marketing, in terms of lead nurturing, I see at a broad level people using email for cold outbound to strangers that never heard of you before. And when you're doing that, you need to be exceptionally careful to make sure that you're offering to deliver them some value and not just nagging them with a selfish ask to book a meeting. In most cases, email tends to be much more effective for nurturing existing contacts that already know, like, and to a certain degree, trust your company, but they haven't quite moved to the point that they're ready for a conversation. Remember, the customer, your client, the buyer is now in control, and they can call the shots for when and how they interact with your sales team. This is very different than 10 years ago. So what we need to be able to do is when your prospects are 60%, 70%, 80% through their decision-making process, we need to know that that's happening. So your sales team, your sales professionals, your account executives know to adjust accordingly. So in order to do this the right way, We need to make sure that we're segmenting our leads properly by who they are and where they are. We need to eliminate any duplicate systems, or at least have really good integration, so we don't accidentally treat customers as prospects and prospects as customers. We need to practice good list hygiene so your sender score doesn't get trashed, so you can get your important emails to continue to get through. All of these are super, super important. Good email nurturing content, good educational email content can help you literally scale 24/7, 365. And this is really, really important because even with great, highly motivated account executives and sales development reps, they typically are only going to be available, maybe 50 or 60 hours a week. There's another 100 hours potentially during a week where one of your prospects and clients could be ready to learn about their goal, ready to learn about solving their challenge. And it may be that you're checked out for a 3 or 4 day holiday weekend and it's 2 o'clock on Saturday, and none of your sales professionals are going to be paying attention to anything for the next 48 hours, maybe up to 72 hours. But if you have fantastic educational resources, great email marketing automation, you'd be shocked at how much someone can self-accelerate through this journey when there's amazing web articles, when there's amazing explainer videos, when there's amazing on-demand webinars, so much to the point where like you get a jaw drop reaction when you come in on Tuesday morning and there's a perfect bullseye sales opportunity who's booked to speak with someone from your team at 2 o'clock that afternoon, and you look in their contact record on the timeline, you're like, this has to be a mistake. They read 73 blog posts. They converted on 12 different offers. They watched 6 hours of webinar recordings. They have like a PhD in being a lead or a sales opportunity for our company. They're going to come in quoting us. And this is an opportunity, but it's also a challenge. So you need to make sure that your client-facing team members know your content, know your events, know your resources, as well as your best prospects and clients are going to. Because certainly the last thing in the world you'd want from a credibility standpoint is to have your prospects and future clients showing up knowing more about your content and your resources than your own team members do. So yeah, that's certainly going to change how you hire, how you upskill, how you do professional development, cross-training, and making sure that you're leveling up to truly show up as a consultant, a teacher, a subject matter expert, a trusted advisor. So when you're thinking about helping your buyers self-accelerate, what kind of messages can you send them that are going to motivate someone to go to step 2, step 3, step 4 completely on their own? A lot of that is having extreme experience, extreme pattern recognition, because you have a lot of muscle memory, you have a lot of case studies, you have a lot of experience working with a certain kind of buyer persona in a certain kind of company, in a certain kind of geographic region, in a certain kind of industry at a certain company size. And when you have those 3 or 4 parameters, it becomes a lot easier to anticipate what they should be thinking about next. So what can we do to use marketing and sales to deliver these timely educational resources? Well, automation is for sure your friend. But successfully automating requires a combination of having great, helpful educational content and the technology that can help you accelerate that. It's super important to make sure that we're thinking about it from their perspective of what they're actually trying to accomplish, not what you want them to accomplish, but the words that describe what they actually want to accomplish. And some great use cases, some great ways to accelerate these sales cycles would be, for example, most of you have likely experienced this one firsthand that's up there on the slide, is encouraging webinar registrants, encouraging event registrants to bring their coworkers, to bring their boss, to bring their colleagues along with them. Hey, I see that you're registered. Typically, this kind of initiative has stakeholders from marketing, sales, account management, product, channel partnerships. So with that in mind, is there anyone else on your team who should also attend? Who else should read this? Who else should download this? Who else should watch this? Accelerating your inbound leads from early to middle to late stage. Again, it's understanding what step 2, step 3, step 4, and having enough content, having enough educational experiences that you can proactively suggest what the next step looks like. Keeping your internal stakeholders in the loop on trigger events. So for example, we talked about the pricing page examples. Do you have simple alerts set up by text, by Slack, or by email to let the contact owner, the account executive or account manager, whoever is responsible for that contact, know that a high value person took a high value step on your website? And educating and building trust over time is an incredibly important part of that. So there's marketing automation, there's sales automation. What's super important is that we're always thinking about this from the standpoint of the prospect or client. What's top of mind for them, whether we're using workflow automation, whether we're using sequences. We don't want to make selfish asks. We always want to be able to deliver value that we know they will care about. And we know they'll care about it because we've done our homework, we've done our customer insight research, we've segmented properly, and we know that when a CTO of a medium-sized manufacturing company from this particular geographic region downloads this ebook, subscribes to our newsletter, registers for our webinar, we know these are the logical 5, 10, 15, 20 different steps that that person's going to go through as they're learning and they're exploring this journey. So having pre-scheduled emails, again, for most people in a SDR kind of role, sales development kind of role, or business development kind of role, usually the goal is to get prospects to self-book a meeting. If you don't currently have the ability for your prospects and clients to self-book meetings, and you have people fill out a form and you're going back and forth trying to find a perfect time, I can tell you without a doubt that you're not competitive on user experience, on customer experience, and you're more than likely frustrating both your internal team members and your prospects and clients who would love nothing more to find a time that works on their schedule and your schedule and have that done in 5 minutes and go on with the rest of their day. And the cool part is, once they've made that decision to book time, there's a very high likelihood that they feel no need to continue searching for more answers because they're satisfied that they found the one person that they want to talk to, and they're looking forward to speaking with you on Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Typically, sales-related sequences tend to be shorter. They're usually very focused on getting that meeting book. Marketing sequences are a lot more realistic about sales cycle length. So if you have a considered purchase decision where 26 weeks, 52 weeks, or something like that, make sure at the absolute minimum that you have enough touch points, enough educational messages that cover that full sales cycle length and then some. And obviously, you want to watch your metrics over time and see which messages are getting good click-through rates, getting good open rates, and adjust accordingly. The stuff that's working well moves to the front. The stuff that's not working well either gets dropped or moved and tested potentially or refined with a different kind of persona at a different life cycle stage. And typically these sequences go until one of three things happens. They self-book a meeting, they reply to the message, or they click a unsubscribe link. Obviously, the ideal scenario is not getting people to hit the unsubscribe link, but you would much rather have that than have disengaged people or even worse, people that are so annoyed that they take action that harms your email sender scores. So some of these outbound prospecting sequences can be used to support prospecting, re-engagement, recent conversions, prospect demo requests, outbound voicemails. There's a lot of steps that you can use to better support all of this. But the goal with all of this is to, instead of thinking about selling your prospects on meeting with someone from your team, focus on helping to guide them through the next logical step in their journey based on who they are and where you think they are in their active research and decision-making process. In terms of your CRM tools, anything that you can do within your CRM system to empower your sales team to respond faster generally helps get sales closed faster. This is the broad category of sales operations, sales enablement, sales automation. So things like templates, snippets, tasks, having a collateral document library, self-book meetings, lead scoring, engagement tracking, automation of logging all makes a big, big difference. If any one of you, if you've been hanging around me for a while, you know that I am a huge fan of webinars and just educational events in general as a massive lever for educating and building trust at scale with your ideal clients and your prioritized buyer personas. So much so that one of the two big focus areas for DCSMI is go-to-market strategy and webinar-led growth. If you've ever heard in the SaaS industry of PLG, product-led growth, we call it WLG, webinar-led growth. And it doesn't mean that all of your webinars have to 100% be online. A lot of great webinar content can be repurposed for amazingly impactful in-person educational events like lunch and learns and breakfast seminars and similar kind of formats. But building a full funnel webinar and events program really, really can make a big difference in educating and building trust and getting more of your leads to close faster. So let's talk briefly about events. I see in data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities, people make the mistake of thinking that if they're not investing tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands and really expensive national and global conferences, that that's the only game in town for events. The reality is, if you start to pay close attention to the guests that I'm interviewing, on the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, I'm starting to spotlight those that are investing in their own grassroots events, events that they're hosting in their own facilities or in local facilities in market in their local areas. And it is shockingly inexpensive relative to the big investments with national and global conferences. It is for you to be able to host your own events. And I've been using this playbook for pretty much my whole career. Early web days, pre-web days, and it's been massively impactful in taking even relatively small groups and educating and building trust. So this is a huge, huge playbook that so many of you should be thinking about when you better understand your buyer personas, your ideal client profile, and their biggest goals, their biggest challenges, and how your internal subject matter experts can help add value to their professional lives, either as individuals, as teams, or as part of companies. So when you think about your event strategy, think about a specific buyer persona and think about a specific life cycle stage or buyer's journey stage that you're at. That's not to say that having an event where you invite, let's say your training classroom holds 20 people. In a perfect world, I would tell you to try to have 2 to 4 of those 20 people be existing clients that love working with your company, and 14 to 16 people in attendance be future potential clients. Why is it amazingly impactful to have your clients that love you also in attendance? Because they're your best sales team. They're your biggest cheerleaders. They're your biggest fans, and their enthusiasm will spread to everyone else in the room. And you can do the same thing with your webinar panels. Let's say you're having 3 or 4 people on a webinar. One of them could potentially be an existing client. 3 of them, 2 or 3 of them could be people that are very similar, real similar ideal client profile, real similar buyer persona, real similar kinds of issues, but they are potential clients down the road. It's really important too to make sure that your educational events deliver value first and worry about sales outcomes later. If people feel like your events or your podcasts or webinars are just a glorified infomercial, they will shut down on you almost immediately. I tell people to use this filter that I called conference grade content. If any of you have ever been fortunate enough to speak on the editorial side of a major IT conference, you likely know exactly what I'm talking about. Most of the people that are on the agenda at a major conference are usually there for editorial reasons, meaning they earn their way in. A small percentage of people that are speaking sometimes have bought their way in. They've paid to play. So let's think about what conference grade content is all about. You have a great title, you have a great paragraph, you have a great bio that gets the advisory committee and the conference manager excited about you being on the agenda on the website to speak at that conference. So from the speaker application, you pass check number 1. 6 or 8 weeks before the conference, they're like, we're really excited that you're speaking at the conference. Send us your deck. We need to understand what you're presenting at the conference to make sure that you're adding enough value to our audience. So they'll take your slides, they'll circulate it to members of the advisory committee that are very similar to the demographics of those that are in attendance. And you'll either get a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or in some cases are like, yeah, we love this, but the middle seems a little bit salesy. Could you add some more examples? Usually in most cases, people that do this on a regular basis fly through with sailing colors with checkpoint number 2. Checkpoint number 3, it's day of the event. There's 100 people in the room. Your goal should be to have nearly 100 of those people on the mobile app to give you the highest score possible for an amazingly valuable session. Goal number 2 is if there was 100 people in attendance at the beginning of the session, for 90 or 95 of them to still be sitting there at the end of the session giving you a standing ovation. If you checked off the boxes and all of these 3 checks and balances, you know exactly what I'm talking about with conference grade content. Your goal with your own webinars, where you're your own conference producer, your events producer, is use the exact same filter, extreme empathy for who they are. So the question is, what can you teach them that will be useful? Who will the speakers be? Do you have internal subject matter experts? Are you going to bring in clients as speakers, channel partners as speakers, consultants as speakers? Optimizing for the best date and time for optimal audience attendance. How are you going to reach them? Do you have an existing database, or do you need to reserve some resources for paid ads, for paid promotions? So there's hosting platforms, there's marketing automation platforms to get the word out, there's social media. But at the end of the day, conference grade content, you have your proposed title and abstract, you have a great slide deck. If you don't have an advisory committee to bounce your slides off of, you could potentially set one up. A lot of companies have customer advisory councils or partner councils, have them be involved, or a few people be involved and say, hey, we're thinking of this calendar for doing 12 webinars next year. What do you think of the topics? Do you think it'll resonate with our audience? Or here's a deck from the first 2 that we're going to do for our 12-part series next year. What do you think of the overall approach to the content? Another interesting thing that's come up over the years in in the mobile apps at conferences is there's now in some cases like a tattletale button where you can report people that are behaving badly, where they've they've hijacked the session into an infomercial, which is like the nightmare scenario of a conference organizer, because they know when people have spent like $5,000 to attend and pay for their hotel and flights and everything to be there, and you're going to 20 sessions over a 3-day event, you want people to get really good value out of most of those 20 sessions if they're going to keep coming back next year. Of course, learning at conferences is typically one of only 3 reasons that people go to conferences. That's usually the biggest one. The second biggest one is networking with peers. If you're in a sales related role, that may be the number 1 reason as opposed to the number 2 reason. And usually a distant third is to visit the booths and learn about new products and services that are available. But remember, every attendee at the session gets a vote. You'll see even from our data center go-to-market 2025 Jumpstart, there's a survey that we want all of you to fill out so we can get feedback so we can continue to improve, iterate, and improve over time. So again, for evaluating your webinar success, some interim metrics, some leading indicators are like the average session time, your participation rates, your survey overall surveys, what the feedback that you get at the end. Besides educational webinars, another big area that a lot of people overlook is the potential of group demos. What group demos essentially are is, think about when you're at a conference, your sales executives, your account executives might like to book one-on-one meetings so they can do some exploratory, do a demo, and really, really advance the sales process. Most people don't want to be put on the spot. Most people don't want to do a demo until they're really, really late in the sales process. But there's a much wider part of the funnel that is curious about what you do. These are the people that might wander by your booth, and they're not standing inches away from the screen, inches away from the person who could scan their badge. They're kind of standing at the back of your booth, like right on the edge of the carpeting. And they're kind of curious and they're listening to the product manager, the CEO, the founder, whatever, give the demo, but they're 20, 30, 40 feet away. They're curious, but they don't want to be badge scanned and they don't want to be put on the spot. These are the same kind of people that love to attend group demos. They're not ready to book time on a salesperson's calendar, but they are super curious about what you do. This is another kind of webinar that's usually more decision stage. And most companies don't have a finely tuned, granular enough webinar program to take both of these webinar strategies into account. And because of that, they're missing out on an enormous amount of demand, because the person that's standing on the edge of the carpet and is curious is also very likely to get about 30, 60, 90 seconds in and take out their phone and Slack their boss, who's 500 feet away, 5 booths away, and say, you got to get over here to booth 37 and check this out. This is the exact same kind of thing that goes on at group demos, is people will start to invite their peers, invite their coworkers on their team, on other teams, potentially even their boss, to learn about what you're doing, but they don't want to be put on the spot through a sales process yet. So besides educational webinars, consider using group demos as another sales cycle acceleration strategy. We're going to be going a lot deeper on this playbook in the upcoming months of full funnel webinar strategy, company-wide webinar strategy, because we know people are barely scratching the surface about what's possible for webinar growth. Group demos are usually scheduled to specifically to warm leads and convert them into sales opportunities by showcasing your company and your product and service. They'll typically use the same kind of live demo format that a account executive would use on a one-on-one demo or small group demo from your same team, except instead of it being just for one particular person or one particular team in a company, it's an open invite to potentially your full list or all your sales opportunities. So again, what's the difference between a webinar and a group demo, and why is this so impactful with taking more of your leads and closing them into clients? Well, you have these conference-grade educational sessions, premium content, that would potentially appear as a breakout session at a technology conference. And then you have these group demos. These are like these 15 to 20-minute demos where you give a little bit of industry background, you take them behind the scenes for 10 or 15 minutes, and then you open it up for Q&A. This is like someone visiting your booth, standing at the back of the booth, at the edge of the carpet. They want to hear what's going on, but they definitely don't want to be badge scanned or put on the spot. These are like your demos that run every 15 minutes or every half hour or hour on the hour or something throughout the conference. Another big area with your events is to think about live streams and live podcasts. Again, very, very meta with what we're talking about today. Some people record podcast episodes as live streams. A traditional podcast gets pre-recorded and released at a later date. You can also live stream podcast episodes similar to like having a live studio audience on a broadcast TV show where people can virtually call in or ask questions. There's not one or either. It's not an either or. It's literally an and. We actually do both. We pre-record podcasts and record them at a later date. I also host a Q&A show on Mondays where I answer a handful of data center go-to-market related questions every single week. Different kinds of people have different kinds of preferences. Some people love to attend live. Some people like to watch on demand. Some people like both. Some people will attend live and then want assets that they can use to align and collaborate and get everyone on the same page with transformation within their company. Then there's also offline events. Remember, I was talking about the idea of offline webinars. What are they all about? Where you're focusing on a single buyer persona, there's a specific goal you're trying to achieve, and they're at a certain stage. Again, if you're primarily producing a customer-only event, you may talk about different topics than an event that's primarily for future clients, for prospects. If you have an event for a specific kind of buyer persona, let's say you want to invite facilities executives or technology executives or compliance executives or finance executives, you likely are going to have a different title, have a different agenda, have a different speaker than you would. So again, the persona, the stage that they're at with your company will definitely force a customization if you really want to be relevant to who they are and what they care about. So like breakfast seminars, lunch and learns, networking receptions, symposias. And you could also potentially not only take your webinars offline, you could take them on the road, meaning you could have them at your facility or another facility that you can rent out relatively inexpensively without a huge time or financial investment. And again, instead of your slides being displayed virtually, they're on a large screen like a TV or an LCD projector or similar kinds of technology. The goal with all of this is to continue educating and building trust, and that alone will do wonders most times with accelerating leads into sales opportunities. Again, the formats all have pros and cons. I don't think it's an either or. I think the goal is to be everywhere that your prospects, that your future clients are. How do you know what everywhere actually is for specific kinds of people? You've done the customer insight research to understand what their preferences are, what's driving them nuts, what they need to achieve to hit their objectives and key results this quarter, next quarter, for the full year, both as an individual, as a team, and as a company. So that's building a full funnel webinar and events program that educates and builds trust. So big picture, your prospects and clients have really changed how they research and make purchase decisions. We know that the self-guided buyer's journey has become the predominant buyer's journey. They're just doing so much research, so much homework before they get to you. And that changes the nature of how you hire, how you do professional development, how you upskill, how you cross-train, and how you show up and where you show up. Unfortunately, most companies in the data center industry, digital infrastructure, critical facilities are really, really unprepared to confront this once in a generation change in purchase behavior, which is so bizarre because for the most part, we're selling technology. It's like we're selling AI and high performance computing and supercomputing and everything else that goes along with it. And we're selling it using a dial-up modem or a fax machine or a BlackBerry. It's so bizarre. So what can you do to make sure that you capitalize on this? Well, for starters, figure out are you living in the present or living in the past? As most of your playbook is focusing way too much energy on just cold messaging people, cold calling, cold emailing, LinkedIn emails, begging for meetings so you can come in and pitch people. Remember, your best prospects and clients have access to insane amounts of information on demand, from listening to podcasts, attending webinars, offline webinars, asking questions of their peers on social media, review websites, watching streaming videos, asking questions all day long to their personal assistants and their LLM tools, their ChatGPT, their Perplexity, their Claude, all this stuff. But these changes aren't just struggles for a lot of companies. They also provide a lot of opportunities for those that can get found early and often as teachers, subject matter experts, consultants, trusted advisors, and some of your team members may ascend all the way to the level of being thought leaders. And again, it's not all or nothing. The more senior members on your team can be the thought leaders, and everyone else on your team are supporting cast members. And the most junior members on your team may just be really good tour guides and really good concierges, but there's a role for everyone. However, these are really, really big culture changes for a lot of companies. And frankly, a lot of companies are Veruca salting this. Don't care how I want it now. And they're unwilling to ask the tough questions that are going to set them up for true success going forward with remaining competitive. So I'm really curious with what we've talked about today so far with 5 ways to close sales faster with your data center leads. What is your biggest takeaway? Please let us know. Do you have any questions on anything we've talked about so far today in day 3, specifically 5 ways to close more clients and more of your leads into new clients, feel free to drop those in the Q&A panel. Usually when I host webinars, I'm kind of indifferent between whether the questions show up in the chat pane or Q&A, but because we have a super active chat pane going, if you help us out by posting them in the question and answer pane, the Q&A pane in Zoom, that'll help us organize it a little better. And towards the end of today's session, after we wrap up the next session, I'll try to answer as many of those questions live as possible. So before we jump into our next segment on how to find the right niches and avoid commoditization, I have a few guest experts that I'd like you to hear from to learn a little bit more about how you can fine-tune your data center go-to-market strategy. The first is Ian McClarty, who's the president of PhoenixNAP, very well-established data center operator with multiple locations throughout the US and a little bit even in Europe now. He's going to talk about how data center sales and marketing are changing. You're also going to hear from Tsafrir Lahav, who's the VP of Global Sales, longtime veteran of the data center and enterprise technology industry. He's over at AimBetter, and he's going to talk with you briefly about the future of sales and customer success. And heading down the home stretch, the final guest expert that you're going to hear from today, as well as for day 3 of Data Center Go-to-Market Strategy Reboot Camp, is Emily Newman. She is the marketing and PR manager at NJFX, a data center operator and telecommunications landing station about an hour south of New York City on the Jersey Shore. And she's going to talk with you briefly about the future of marketing and AI. So we handpick these segments directly from the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast that I host because I think they give you exceptional value, some exceptional sound bites as a great way to bridge some of our segments together. So I'd encourage you to listen, take some great notes, takeaways, use your workbook to organize your thoughts, and feel free to share some of your most impactful takeaways, what resonated most, what you learned from Ian, what you learned from Tsafrir, what you learned from Emily in the chat pane. So let's hear from Ian.
Hi, this is Ian McClarty, and you're watching the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast.
And shifting gears to another topic, we've noticed that a lot of SMB decision makers, mid-market enterprise decision makers are tending to prefer a self-service driven journey now where they're doing so much research on their own before they're ready to talk with someone from your team. Internally, are you seeing that? Your marketing and sales folks and account management folks seeing that yet, where they have to change gears a little bit? Or are they still able to use most of what they've done in the past to grow PhoenixNAP?
Great question. So it really depends on the product line, right? If you look at the more self-service type products that we create, obviously that's not the case. You know, that's marketing is very much involved in helping grow that business, and sales is involved very much post-transaction, right? So they're not involved in the initial transaction typically nowadays. They're involved post-transaction. So the flow does change, but it becomes more of a kind of helper role, right? Versus trying to sell out or being able to coordinate complexity in the platform, right? As they scale out, they may start with one system, but they need now to scale out to maybe things that they don't see in the platform. Number one, that requires human interaction, or things they may want, requests, a feature requests, right? And so the role of sales changes there. It's more to help fulfill platform needs versus trying to sell on the platform itself. And so that's a different mindset. So the role has morphed. When it comes to traditional colocation, space and power services, the buyer tends to still be very, especially the bigger the enterprise, still very structured. Real estate, it's more like a real estate transaction mentally, right? And so the conversation is still very different there. But there's definitely a hybrid mode where folks that have really figured out that, especially with IT deployments nowadays, it's not single anything. It's not single deployment in one area, of IT even or space. It could be like deployed in multiple cloud providers, multiple colocation providers. It all needs to be interconnected. There's a lot more complexity associated with it, and companies do this on necessity because they're trying to keep a cost basis under control, or they themselves need more flexibility. Or sometimes they don't even realize it and they just have a less sprawl, which does happen, and we do see it. And so it really depends what part of the journey they're in. And so having sales folks that can adapt and can kind of understand these different use case scenarios. Again, our industry is getting more complex, not less. So there's definitely more, I would say, demand from a salesperson. It's not picking up the phone and dialing. That's not what's getting deals done today. It's understanding their IT needs. Really, at the end of the day, that's what's getting deals done. And when you can have a conversation, have the talk, you don't have to go deep and be the deep technologist, but you have to really understand what they're trying to accomplish and how. And so sometimes you can come up with creative ways to help them out. And that really is what closes deals. And so having folks that really are adaptive and can understand that is I think, is going to be what the new sales organization is going to look more like versus your traditional smile and dialers, right?
So it truly is the salespeople morphing into more roles of consultants, kind of what I've been calling for a couple of years. They look more like a Big Four consultant than a traditional transactional focused quota focused salesperson. Yeah.
I mean, the transactional side of the house is easy to fulfill for organizations like ourselves. I mean, many, right? I mean, you can automate that entire process, So we've changed around what the salesperson is really doing, post-transaction. Post-transaction is more important because that's where you build a relationship. That's where you get an opportunity, right? That's where you can grow that book of business and understand what they're really trying to do. And we've seen that across our sales folks, right? They really try to understand, even the technology itself, and also, you've done well when you have their technology people whiteboarding and showing you, how they're structured and their flows and their plans for the future, right? And where they want to scale out. That's when you've done a good job at that point.
When they're bringing you behind the curtain to show you what's really going on at a deep level and asking you for insight and advice on what they should do. Yeah,
and also even very proprietary systems that they've set up and developed, right? Giving you insight to that. That's proprietary knowledge that you can't research. That's a very walled and shielded information. Once you get to that point, you're in a good place.
You're definitely checking off the box of educating and building trust, and you've built the trust because they're confiding in you with trusted information. Yeah, that's so cool.
Hello and everyone, this is Tsafrir Lahav from AimBetter. You are watching and listening Data Center Go-to-Market podcast. Thank you.
The content, the education, the training on pre-sales, post-sales training, onboarding, all of that is very, very conducive to using an approach of being proactive in educating and building trust. It helps to make more self-serve available. It scratches the itch of clients and prospects that want to be more in the driver's seat. And this is also research that Gartner's been talking about for a couple of years now, especially when you're selling to IT professionals, is this extreme allergy to spending much time with traditional salespeople with the typical stereotypes that come along with it. I've been talking for 2-3 years and encouraging people to go to their email signature, their LinkedIn profile, their business card, and start coming up with a better synonym and invest in an onboarding program, an internal training program, so your sales professionals actually are more like Big Four consultants and actually can really add value and really are trusted advisors when it comes to their prospects and clients. And it brings up kind of the next thing that I wanted to get your thoughts about is when you look out into the crystal ball 2, 3, 4 years out from now, how does running a sales organization for a company like AimBetter change, or anywhere in enterprise software, infrastructure, data centers? How do you envision that the role of a sales professional or a sales leader is going to change in the next few years?
So I do think that we need to be more professionals. So I think, again, because of my background, to always be the pre-sale, always be the visionary person, and then actually do the sales and teach it to the other guys. I do think that salespeople need to be much more professionals. And today to learn, it's easy with all the podcasts and AI and YouTube and all the other tools that you have, that you can actually do it online all the time. So learning, it's important. I think with AI, we will get more and more in the lower SaaS solution that probably can be even a boot that will start selling. I'm not speaking about online presentation solution or online website creation solution that people is coming in, try to do a website, and then a boot coming up and show them how to do it, and then push them to actually go to premium or go to similar or basic or something that will from freemium go to premium. I'm speaking about professional sales. In professional sales, I think that the AI tools is going to be very strong, but the human interaction will stay at least for the next 2, 3, 4 years. In the data center, enterprise, mid-enterprise environment, people still need to actually talk to a human being, understand the product. You can use the AI to do a nice demonstration, nice live demo, and so on. But in the end, at least for the next 2, 3, 4 years, human interaction is going to be a very significant base to actually do the enterprise sales.
It definitely helps too when you're selling into mid-market and enterprise, and the unit economics are strong enough that you can afford the talent that you need to build a sales team like that. Whereas kind of the other extreme, when you look at some SaaS companies or hosting companies that are selling to small and medium-sized businesses with much, much lower price points, then there becomes a lot more pressure to automate more. But you're right, where you're talking about professional sales as opposed to product-led growth or self-sign-up, self-onboarding kind of thing. But yeah, when you talk about like the logos and the brands that a company like AimBetter is working with, yeah, for sure. I imagine that they're demanding quite a bit of pre-sales, true consulting to try to figure out who the stakeholders are going to be, what's going to change, what the process is, how you get alignment, what the change management is going to look like.
I think,
how they test and pilot this.
I think, by the way, that the SDRs, that there is too much of them, I think the AI bot in the end will change them, will replace them, and all the SDRs out there need to go up and become mid-enterprise salespeople. If they stay in SDRs, they're going to lose the job for the AI bot.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I do see a really interesting retraining, repurposing role for the SDRs as well. I have this thought process that on a considered purchase, most companies should be producing a lot of educational thought leadership content. They should have great educational webinars, great webinar panels, conference-grade content that's so good that if someone took a plane ride and spent 3 days at a conference and they went to this particular session, that you'd get a fantastic review on that. I believe that most companies should have the podcasts and the webinars and the live streams. And I think in a lot of ways, the sales development reps that have a little bit of experience and understanding of the personas could be great to work with a internal marketing team or a media team to be the moderator, the host, and build these relationships, gain this great insight that they can pass to a product manager, build these collaborations industry-wide. So I think for companies that have a little bit of vision, that could be a really interesting role for sales development reps going forward. Historically, also sales development reps have sometimes moved into sales enablement kind of roles. That could be another interesting thing. Some of them may move into more traditional marketing roles. Some of them move into product management roles. But yeah, for sure, that those early stages of the journey where people don't want the human conversation as much as wanting the educational resources, they'd be great to understand the context of the kinds of questions and the kind of interactions that people would want, except instead of forcing this into 100 dials a day to get to a couple of conversations to book one meeting, they're working with a media team to package these into great podcast interviews, webinar panels, explainer videos, nurturing sequences, carousels, interactive tools, quizzes, all that stuff.
Hi, I'm Emily Newman, PR Marketing Manager here at NJFX, and you're listening to the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast.
So, Emily, you're 2 years into this marketing leadership role with NJFX. What do you think the next 2 years, what do you think the future holds for this kind of role 2, 3, 4 years out from now? What do you think is going to stay the same? What do you think is going to change?
What we're doing right now with this AI boom is massive to our company. NJFX, we're a 2-story facility, so our second floor is really dedicated dedicated to our network carriers, and then our downstairs floor is now actually turning more into our AI infrastructure, where we're going to be having liquid cooling solutions upon request, depending on how high of a density cabinet you are looking for. I see a huge impact of what NJFX is going to be doing in the next 2 years. Not really sure where I'm gonna be. I'm with NJFX till the end, and I'm really excited to see how this will play out. And anything that comes our way, I'm just gonna take it with every opportunity, like I normally do, and hope that NJFX and this AI infrastructure becomes a huge success. There's a lot that is going into it, a lot of planning, a lot of logistics that need to make sure that this is really happening, and we have a very strong team that is making this secure for us, and working with partners like EXA and Bulk and Supermicro are just on the top of the chain of what is happening within our facility. And I know a lot of data centers are now working on this, and the great thing about NJFX is that we already have the infrastructure in place, where you see a lot of new data centers being built today to withstand for the AI demand. But that's going to take years to come, while we're kind of already in that front door step of being enabled already. We have the connectivity standpoint already secure. Now it's just getting connectivity and edge AI to integrate with each other. And that's where I think we're really going to see a huge boom is the edge AI inference and connectivity coming in together.
So that was Ian McClarty, Tsafrir Lahav, and Emily Newman giving you a perspective from data center operators, telecommunications, data center software, enterprise software on the future of data center marketing, sales, and data center go-to-market. Please let us know what your biggest takeaways are from Ian McClarty, Tsafrir Lahav, and Emily Newman. And we'd love to also get your feedback on what you thought of infusing these 11 different guest expert segments in the 3-day training event, Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart. So what's up next? We're going to talk about how to find the right data center niches and avoid commoditization. And this originally started as a session specifically focused on data center operators. But I've found that the more times I've talked about these ideas with other parts of the data center ecosystem, I found facilities consulting firms getting enormous value from it. I found design build firms in the real estate side, construction side, getting a lot of value from it, a lot of technology companies getting a lot of value from it. So 80 or 90% of it is universally applicable to companies throughout the full data center ecosystem on the mindsets, the methodologies to help you find niche markets and avoid being commoditized. And when it comes to this topic, we usually find that people struggle with leads, filling or expanding their data center, closing deals, channel partner engagement, channel partner enablement, and getting tenants for their facilities. So what's your biggest challenge that you have found when it comes to identifying the right niches and avoiding becoming a commodity? Let us know in the chat pane. What's super interesting with the whole reason this methodology started, I started talking about this all the way back in the 2010s, was I saw a lot of web hosts in the low end side of colocation start to feel an incredible amount of pressure as that rolled up, as the companies rolled up into each other and the players became bigger and bigger and bigger. And I've seen the same thing happening on the colocation data center operator side in the last 3 or 4 years. And I think it's going to become even more pronounced now that we have all these requirements for incredibly high amounts of density and liquid cooling and power megawatts and potentially gigawatts that just weren't even on the radar screen 5 or 10 years ago. So in terms of 10 ways to find the right niches and avoid commoditization, we're first going to talk about the value of managed services, but not necessarily as a managed service provider, assessing your product market fit, getting in front of buyers in today's buyer's journey, analyzing your positioning, your competitive positioning, taking stock of what assets that you have, how to make sure that you're attracting the right strangers, how to generate more of the right high impact high intent leads, how to accelerate more of those leads into sales, how to scale revenue growth to both your existing clients and your new clients, and how to let the data from your best clients and your buyer personas dictate your niche and approaches going forward, which is also exceptionally powerful if you want to sit down and have conversations with your CFO or your board members around unit economics. So when we think about this, there's really two battlefronts that a lot of data center operators need to compete against. There's the company size battlefront, and you can see some of the logos from the biggest players that are in there. And then there's the individual differentiators. They're anti-commoditization superpowers, so to call it. So will you win 100% of the time based on always being the biggest? No. There's a lot of companies that have a terrible experience with one of the huge operators, and they go to the other extreme. They want to buy from a company where they can have a direct relationship with the CEO or the owner or a C-level executive. And then there's others that want something in the middle, Goldilocks, not too big, not too small. So if you're kind of figuring out what size you would fit into as a co-location operator, you have the global providers, all the global, what are kind of household names within our industry, where they have dozens of data centers on multiple continents. You have the national data centers with hundreds of employees, typically a minimum of 10 different data centers. You have the regional players with a couple dozen different employees that have a minimum of 3 data centers. So they start to check off the boxes on DR and geographic diversity. And then you have the local single location operators, 1 or 2 locations, fewer than 50 employees. Again, the kind of counterintuitive thinking about all of this, when I've talked about these topics at like Critical Facilities or Data Center World or MSP Expo, I really thought the core audience would be some of the smaller local and regional co-locations. I was actually wrong. It actually was, not only were they interested, but the nationals and the global players were super interested as well. The survey feedback and all the people that came up to talk from the afterwards told a really, really different story. The individual contributors and even the C-level execs from some of the biggest operators in the US told me that these insights were really highlighting some of their strengths and putting a glaring spotlight on some of their weaknesses that they wanted to be able to address that they were missing. So I like to talk about this basic framework. Are you a horizontal co-location operator or a vertical co-location operator? Horizontal, colo, holo, or a volo, vertical co-location, meaning that if you're horizontal, you're more of a generalist. Anyone that shows up with a valid form of payment or a credit card, come on down. Or are you a vertical co-location expert where you really are focused on standing out from the crowd, delivering unique value that's exceptionally useful for specific kinds of industries, specific kind of verticals, specific kinds of markets? And generally, the smaller your company is, the harder it is to fight these battles on multiple fronts. And we even see among the largest data center operators on the planet, we're seeing a lot more specialization on go-to-market teams where they're assigning people to a book of business, to an account list that's very tightly focused on a certain kind of vertical market in a certain kind of geographic area, so they can get to know those couple dozen, those couple hundred accounts really, really well, and able to deliver a lot of unique insights, like consultative insights as a subject expert, as a teacher, as a trusted advisor in those early stages. So there's a lot of data center operators that are heavily into providing managed services now, but not necessarily as a managed service provider. And this is a big paradigm shift that a lot of companies are missing. And the challenge is generally the smaller you are, the more important it is to have a clear line in the sand about what it is that you do versus what your channel partners will do. You think about like what managed services looked like 20 years ago. They were providing outsourced virtual services to small and medium-sized business. Remote access was a big thing. Server log monitoring, going all the way back to the work that I did with Microsoft's small business server team in Redmond in the early 2000s. This was a big, big part of the playbook. And this was the golden age of like Microsoft Small Business Server and Novell NetWare, Lotus Notes, Groupware, pre-managed service provider, before they were really the predominant business model. In the early 2010s, global economic downturn became more about outsourced virtual IT for small and medium-sized businesses still, and things like mobile device management, remote management, early cloud adoption, like with Google Apps, known as Google Workspace, AWS and Salesforce were starting to come into their own. The hardware refresh center, the client server refresh centered around these upgrade cycles, was nearing its end. And MSPs and data centers were still largely separate business models. When we look at the two today, especially for local operators, there's a lot of blurring the lines between the two, especially at a few dozen employees. And this causes a lot of friction and a lot of resentment and a lot of mistrust among operators. So I would encourage you to, whether it's a whiteboard, whether it's a flip chart, whether it's a spreadsheet, think about what your channel partners should be doing and what your company should be doing. The managed service provider CEO still is focusing on local clients that have a lot of demand for infrastructure. The MSP is buying wholesale colocation. They're selling it as retail. They kind of have this mindset that we better manage this or someone else will. And they believe strongly that we have the best people, the best service, and the best price. The challenge is the colocation CEO, they're sitting in their facility most of the time. They're not running around to client sites as much. That's usually one of the bigger lines in the sand. But they're saying a lot of the same things, and that's really confusing to their core client base. The SMB clients, they like them because they have quicker sales cycle. They need more pro services than enterprise clients. They tend to partner selectively with MSPs, but they recognize that most of these MSPs really, really struggle with marketing and sales. They have this mindset that we'd better manage this infrastructure or someone else will. And they're saying the exact same thing. We got the best people, the best service, and the best price. So in a lot of ways, the local colocation providers kind of become the new managed service provider chasing after the same outsourced SMB clients. And this is causing a lot of crushing amounts of commoditization, especially if you only have a few locations. Today's colocation business challenges are looking a lot like the MSP and hosting challenges that many companies struggled with in the last decade. Many colocation companies tend to think the answer is to recruit an army of commission-only channel partners, but many really are not ready to fully support these folks as they need to be supported. They're not simple, trivial decisions. That's likely why a lot of you are here today, and a lot of the same resources and support that your internal sales and internal services folks need, your channel partners need as well. The challenge is they're not working for you 40, 50, 60 hours a week. You're just one of 5 or 10 or 20 different programs that they work with, and there's probably at least a few dozen clients that they're working with at any given time. So how is your product market fit? How are you set up to be able to truly understand who your ideal clients are, what they buy from you, the price points, all the good unit economics? This is, again, the degree to which your company's offering satisfies that you know there's strong demand. It comes from the SaaS, it comes from the venture capital world. In other words, do you know exactly what they buy, who they are? Do you have case studies on your website that support this? And how well do you know these unit economics? And for many people trying to figure out product market fit, defining your buyer personas is a huge part of getting tighter relevancy to who they are and what they care about. In other words, is the primary point of contact at these clients, are they so small that you're dealing directly with a CFO, or you're dealing with an IT leader? Is your best foot in the door a finance person? It really could be all over the place. And if you decide to take on greater elements of being like a managed service provider, and you get into also doing web app development and software development and providing unified communications, a lot of single location or real small co-location operators get into these getting a bigger share of wallet. It can become an even blurrier line. And if you skip this, there can be a lot of confusion around who your ideal clients are, what products and services they buy from you. And it tends to lead to a lot of problems, not only in the marketing and sales side, but on hiring and services and net promoter score. So getting clarity around your key performance indicators like lifetime value, cost of acquisition, sales cycle length is really, really important. And it's hard to do that if there's more than 2 or 3 different kinds of buyers that you sell to. So, is there CTO Tom? Is there CFO Fred? Is there compliance Connie? And do you know the unit economics when that person is the lead person on the account? Almost certainly you're going to see significant differences as you start to put a lot of data into each of those boxes to understand who's got the highest lifetime value, who's got the quickest, most efficient sales cycle, who's got the lowest cost of acquisition. It's going to vary depending on their role and the kind of company that they come from. As the great philosopher John Bon Jovi once said, it's all the same, only the names will change. So it doesn't matter really the nature of your business model and who the buyer personas are. You could be selling to a NOC manager, you could be selling to a cybersecurity officer. It doesn't really matter. It's the same basic methodology. We got to get clarity on who they are, what they care about, and how efficient they are to be able to sell to in terms of how much they spend with your company, what it costs to acquire a new client like that, and the length of the sales cycle. I've seen so many companies struggle with this throughout the data center ecosystem. A couple of years back, someone came to me when they were actually shutting down their business and pivoting into a completely new business model, and really told me that they had to go back to the drawing board because everything that they were doing with their traditional sales process and their traditional marketing wasn't working. That was a leading indicator of everything we're talking about today and yesterday in this whole 3-day series in Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart. Is not only have the market demands changed, the way they want to research and make their purchase decisions has completely changed. So what can you do to get in front of today's colocation buyer's journey? What can you do to show up so you have significant surface area, significant footprint in that first 83%? So not only do you get away from the price sensitive buyers, the tire kickers, the time wasters that demoralize your company and waste huge amounts of time, but it completely changes the whole trajectory of your business and oftentimes shines a spotlight on what to do a lot more of and what to do a lot less of. A lot of it comes down to being very aware and leaning into the self-guided buyer's journey. For most colocation operators, you usually want to have both a local go-to-market playbook and a long-distance go-to-market playbook. In other words, where proximity matters and where proximity doesn't matter. For a lot of colocation operators, where latency and governance and edge is a big part of it, it's a long distance playbook. For a lot of others, where server hugging is a part of a playbook, then proximity matters. And it really depends. You almost certainly will need a different playbook at awareness, consideration, and decision, and perhaps even some different team members specializing in this. But for sure, the journey has changed a lot. For a lot of companies, their marketing and sales just hasn't kept up. If you're going to be able to select the right kinds of clients, the right kinds of hires, and avoid commoditization, the way you think about the competition will likely need to change. So when we think about what's going on with your competitive positioning, when I used to give this talk at some major industry conferences back in the 2010s, and you can see one of them right here, I used to use live examples. And at the time, we were comparing some publicly available benchmarks from ByteGrid, Colo Crossing, Cologix, and Volta, that's now Arc, right? Peak 10, that's been Flexential for a while, and V-Exchange, I believe, is Element Critical. A lot of the names have changed, but the same basic issue here. We're looking at what we can learn about how your competitors are doing well or phoning it in when it comes to digital. And originally, I was a little concerned that people might be upset, that they would think I'm picking on them at these conferences, but it actually turned out to be quite the opposite. Even with these publicly available metrics, it turned out the opposite that happened. Two people at that particular event came up with lavish that were featured in the examples, came up with lavish compliments at the end, and ended up being one of the 5 highest rated sessions out of dozens of sessions at the conference. Go figure that a marketing, sales, and go-to-market expert outruns most of the technology and facilities professionals. But all the mergers and acquisitions and the M&A and the rebranding throws a big monkey wrench in a lot of this, and we continue to see tons of consolidation happening in this space. Actually, even a lot of layoffs happen many times because teams continue to consolidate. So I'll briefly share my methodology and framework for how we evaluate different degrees of competition. Throughout Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart, you've heard me talk about direct, indirect, and non-business model competitors. Your direct competitors are the obvious ones that you run into all the time at the proposal stage. Your indirect competitors are either a lot bigger or a lot smaller than your company, or they're not as geographically relevant because of proximity or lack of proximity. And your non-business model competitors, those are all the companies and organizations, educational entities that are producing great educational resources, great educational events on a regular basis, and as a result are competing for attention with your ideal clients and your most important kinds of buyer persona. So when we think about your competitors and their thought leadership strategy and their website authority, we're looking at things like website homepage coverage. We're looking about what they talk about on their navigation menus, how findable they are on search engines, and like how good a job they're doing with their educational content, having content and navigation and choices that are specific to certain kinds of people, certain kinds of buyer personas and specific stages of the journey. Is their title well optimized? Or they have just a few or a lot of website domains that link into them that help with their search engine authority? Again, those are all things that you can for sure sleuth out and see from the companies that you go head to head with. In terms of their team investments and competition, this is a fantastic thing to sit down in LinkedIn Sales Navigator and see how many employees are on LinkedIn, as a percentage of total employees that you can find in sales and business development. Those are actually two separate job functions in LinkedIn. In marketing, there's also some design and some communications that's in there, kind of the first cousin of marketing. You can look at the ratio of sales and business development to marketing, again, just by pulling these numbers directly from Sales Navigator. You can get the total employees, and you can find the total number of employees that have been active on LinkedIn in the past 30 days. Another quick thing that's not as big of an issue anymore as it used to be is when you look at the CEO's profile, is there a good recent professional picture? Does the CEO have at least 500 connections? And what about the sales director and the marketing director? You know, it's a little strange. You would think in most companies that the marketing leader would want to really take the strong leadership role in anything and everything having to do with go-to-market. But among these three categories, it's actually the marketing director sometimes that I see that doesn't have 500 connections, that either has a couple hundred or even a few dozen connections, more than likely because they still have this purist idea that every single one of their connections needs to be people that are former coworkers that they know exceptionally well. And that's just not even remotely best practice anymore and hasn't been best practice for decades. I would also, when you're looking at your competitors' thought leadership strategy and what they do on social media, think about their reach and the number of updates that they've done on their blog in the past 30 days, how active they are on LinkedIn, how active they are on YouTube, on X, on Facebook, and Instagram. If you're thinking about the buyer personas that are most relevant for a colocation operator, get really clear on the social properties that matter most. I see a lot of people struggle across too many channels when their buyer personas would probably steer them very clearly in the direction that LinkedIn matters more than everything. And YouTube is probably your second most important because YouTube's become a proxy for search as the large language models like ChatGPT gobble up traditional search engine optimization. Again, you need to do your own homework, your own customer insight research, do your own buyer personas and figure this out for sure. But there's an excellent chance that the internal champions in your target companies that are doing things related to data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities are more than likely also most active when it comes to their professional lives on LinkedIn. You know, LinkedIn now has more than 1 billion members globally, and they might use X or Twitter every so often. They might post some personal things on Facebook and Instagram, but when it comes to their job, it's very, very clear that LinkedIn has won the battle with nearly all buyer personas that are important to data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. You also can go through your competitor's website and see how they convert visitors to leads, what their lead generation conversion offers look like. Is there educational content or is it all selfish content? Does the blog actually educate and build trust, or are these just glorified news releases? Again, more selfish content. And are there good relevant calls to action in the blogs that take people to early and middle stage and not just late stage offers? Again, this was an issue a couple of years ago, not as big of an issue anymore if you have a modern content management system and have updated your website in the last couple of years. But of course, it needs to be mobile friendly. Of course, there needs to be SSL in place. Of course, there needs to be a content management system. Otherwise, how are you going to update your hundreds of pages of content on a regular basis if everything has to go through your web dev team all the time? And of course, to be competitive, because Veruca Salt is your buyer persona, don't care how I want it now, the immediate gratification, live chats become a really big deal, and marketing automation. And there's a lot of tools like SimilarWeb and BuiltWith and things like that that can help you learn a little bit more about their MarTech stack, their sales tools that they have in place. So again, when we think about how large colocation, local colocation, regional colocations navigate where they're losing deals versus winning deals, we have the single colocation, we have a certain amount of footprint in sales and business development. In the really small companies, there tends to be very little, if any, investment in marketing and sales. Typically, they're leaning 100% on self-signups and the owner or owners. There tends to be very low investment in talent. The sales process is virtually non-existent. They don't tend to have a really strong grasp on product market fit or go-to-market fit. And there's literally zero educational content on the website. There's no way for one of your prospects to spend a half hour, an hour, 2 hours on your website learning and allowing them to self-educate and getting you to trust more. They're just completely asleep at the wheel on this. And it's such a shame because you really don't need a large team to do this, right? But you do need to make it a priority to be consistent and show up in an empathetic way that adds value to your buyer persona's professional lives. The challenge with the local colocation operator playbook is, again, they're going after the exact same clients as the managed service providers. They tend to have a little bit more marketing and sales stake in the ground, but they're typically getting completely blown away by the regionals and the nationals and the globals. So they're being forced to compete on price, and they're selling and marketing like it's still 10 years ago. And if that wasn't difficult enough, many of them are also facing issues now with where the facilities won't be able to handle the density requirements anymore, won't be able to install things like liquid cooling, immersion cooling, and things like that to keep up with the AI loads, the GPU-driven loads, high-performance computing. So they're going to end up with the bottom of the barrel clients once again, who can't get the service that they want from the big guys. I do think there's a silver lining for the local colocation operator, though, because of your proximity, is that some of your facility could be great for edge, where people have a premium on extreme proximity for latency reasons or even for governance reasons. Obviously, another big threat, another big battleground in the to repatriate or not to repatriate is the degree to which there's public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, and you're going head to head with GCP, AWS, and Azure. So thinking about taking stock of your content assets or lack thereof, what do you have? Because the way Colo is researched and purchased has really, really changed. I think what you're seeing there is probably a mainframe from even before my time. My first recollections of getting involved in the IT industry was, the risk of dating myself, the Apple II. In the 1980s, when I was at school, when a 5.25-inch floppy drive and a dot matrix printer was state of the art. I think this is a good generation before that, when Steve Jobs was perhaps just born. So we know about the self-guided buyer's journey. We know about the importance of getting in early and often. We know about the self-driven buyer's preferences. And we know there's really a good chance that your buyers don't want to buy colocation the way you're currently marketing and selling. You heard during our session break before, Ian McClarty, one of the largest, most successful data center, independently owned data center operators in the country, talking about exactly that in many cases with the commoditized services, their sales team, their account managers get involved post-sales as opposed to pre-sales on the commoditized kind of stuff. So like we've talked about throughout this 3-day training event, think about reinventing your sales professionals to show up more as Big Four consultants, thought leaders, and expert advisors. The days of sales professionals being able to lock up information and serve as gatekeepers of information have completely gone. Search engines and social media and chat bots and LLMs have completely won that battle. The bigger issue is helping your sales professionals upskill and show up getting out of the vendor box and staying out of the vendor box when it comes to educating and building trust with prospects. The ones that truly want to pull off the doctor-patient consultative relationship will need to allocate some time to keep up with being the consummate thought leader consumer, especially of your own thought leadership and webinars, at least for your own initiatives. And as you heard from Brandon Pecorello earlier on in Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart about how he describes his nights and weekend projects that he runs in his home computer lab. If you're in the operator space, if you're in the technology space, your more seasoned member of your sales team should be able to have great, insightful conversations with technology executives. No one needs them to read the slides or the website to them anymore. So what are you doing with your investments in content and educational events to attract the right strangers? That's what this is all about. Because in a buyer-centric world, the burden is really on us to make sure that we only end up with good fit clients. Don't chase vanity metrics. The days of fans, followers, likes, retweets, subscribers, all of branding we've talked about is now what the industry and the marketplace says about what your company when you're not in the room. So unfortunately, if your creative director is still controlling 100% of the brand, you need a bigger committee there, your thought leadership committee, your thought leadership team, because we need to, of course, branding and design matters. Of course, engagement and media mentions matters, but conversions, deal stages, lifetime value, cost of acquisition, product market fit are even more important. We want to make sure that we attract the right stakeholders and the right decision makers in the right place at the right time, and most of all, in the right context. So our prospects and clients see us as the be-all, end-all experts. There can't be a car salesperson anymore asking, what's it going to take to get you into this cabinet today? You've heard from multiple people in the guest segments there that there still are operators that act like they're selling real estate or act like they're selling co-working for servers, like that they're running like a WeWork location and the servers get to buy memberships and get to check in and enjoy the power and enjoy the telecommunications and enjoy the space. The reality is we all need to be domain experts to be successful, so we can truly partner, consult, diagnose before we prescribe, in many cases doing paid engagements and getting a lot more respect from our prospects and clients. In order to reverse engineer the revenue growth, we want to have our revenue goals with our new revenue sourced for our new clients. We know what our average deal size is, and that will help us figure out how many new sales opportunities we need. So what can we do to generate more high intent leads potentially for our products and services? Many in the colocation space have severely underperformed in their lead generation investments. The ones that are able to get past this have typically recognized that their websites need to be a lot more than glorified brochures, and they need a lot more places where there's educational content offers throughout the whole website. Usually the symptom to know that this has gone completely off the rails is there's usually only a few places on the whole website where a hot prospect can raise their hand, and most of them center with ones that are ready to talk with a human from your sales team. When in reality, if that's the only places that you can generate a lead, you're completely missing the first 83% of the game. Your website needs to be the hardest working 724, 365 rep, doesn't call in sick, doesn't need time off, doesn't butt heads with coworkers, doesn't overpromise and underdeliver, doesn't sacrifice pricing for short-term gains, and doesn't threaten to take their book of business to the competition. Your lead generation refinements, think about how you're showing up for each persona, how you're showing up for each of those stages, especially for your 2 or 3 most important buyer personas, making sure that you're hitting all the most important best practices for conversion landing pages. Again, this isn't new. This isn't rocket science. Big data center operators, big technology companies, and facilities companies in the space have been doing all of this and doing a great job on this now for the better part of a decade. So if this is completely new to you, just recognize that this isn't time to dip your pinky toe in the pool. This is time to recognize that you've fallen behind in a big time way from a competitive standpoint, and it's time to take massive action to catch up. You essentially need content and educational events experiences that are so intensely, insanely valuable in the eyes of the beholder that people are essentially willing to trade their business card for what's on the other side of the landing page. From the friends don't let friends department, don't invest in paid ads, paid search, or paid social until you have great lead generation landing pages that are performing well and great lead generation content and events to cover at least the absolute minimum length of your average sales cycle. There doesn't really tend to be many impulse buys in colocation. And even when there's a server down emergency that presents what seems like it's a rapid sales cycle, for every one of those, there's someone that's locked into a 24 or 36 month contract. So we need to make sure if you have sales cycles that sometimes run 52 weeks, 104 weeks, you need a way to stay in front of those folks for 52 weeks or 104 weeks. Content, events, super, super important. In order for us to stay on top of this opportunity and show up in the way that they want us to show up, we need to not only measure what's working and what's not, and optimize and iterate and improve over time. And again, the tools to make this happen are not science fiction. They're not rocket science. They've existed for a better part of a decade. The difference is 10 years ago, you could get away with ignoring a lot of this stuff and still have a viable business. Today, as we're moving at an increasingly rapid speed towards a self-guided buyer's journey, these nice to haves are now must-haves. We just talked before about how you can accelerate more of your leads into sales opportunities. We've talked at length about the self-driven buyer's journey. We've talked about the importance of showing up early. We've talked about making sure that your whole team understands the difference between a lead and a sales opportunity. We've talked about the importance of the tic-tac-toe board, your most important buyer personas across the top, their buyer's journey stage, so the content and the context, and making sure that we have good stuff, good relevant educational offers, good relevant educational events to fill in at least one of these in each one of these boxes. So we resonate with technology, we resonate with finance, we resonate with compliance, whoever your most important buyer personas are for your most important business model. The building blocks with all of this, we've talked about at length the importance of research-based buyer personas. We've talked about the importance of premium content for each kind of person and each stage they go through, and how that's essentially what pulls someone in by the virtual short collars when they're scrolling by and screams relevance and becomes nearly impossible to ignore. We've talked about the importance of conversion path best practices for accelerating leads into sales opportunities. We've talked about the extreme importance of segmenting based on who they are and where they are. We've talked about automation. No one's going to have any sympathy for the fact that it's 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon on a holiday weekend and no one's going to be around from your sales team for 48 hours. It's Veruca Salt. Don't care how, I want it now. and of the importance of events for educating and building trust at scale. But we are not done with our colocation sale when the deal is closed. Ian McClarty hammered this home. The new client, the new channel partner needs to be onboarded. They need intended value, initial value, intended value, and extended value, the typical customer success account manager kind of life cycle. And that matters more than ever. So what can we do to scale your revenue growth across new and existing clients? This is the importance of account management, customer success, customer education, customer marketing. So more important than ever to nail retention, great net promoter score, great digital promoters, great digital word of mouth. We need structured onboarding for new clients. Each client needs to learn how to get the most value out of their investments that they have with our company. We need to educate new clients about how others have achieved their goals, plans, and challenges that are similar to their situation. And all too often, what ends up happening, especially in colocation operators, but this is a pervasive problem throughout the industry, is marketing reports to sales. And because of that, marketing can only support things that are going to have an impact in the next 30 days. And because of that, there's minimal effort at trying to figure out how to have scalable resources, self-propelled resources that can help customer marketing, that can help product marketing, that can help channel marketing. And it's a shame because the exact same skill set for educational resources and educational events isn't just needed on the sales team. It's also needed in account management. It's also needed in product management. It's also needed big time in channel partner management, even needed among HR, although that's often neglected too. There's a couple of data center recruiters who are starting to change the narrative around that. But again, just like the real estate part of the data center part, the recruiters are a slow moving part of the data center industry when it comes to these kinds of conversations. So how does great customer success keep your customer acquisition flywheel moving with digital word of mouth? The goal is to transform your customers into promoters and for those promoters to help bring in more strangers so they become an extension of your sales team. The toolbox for doing this, fantastic segmentation, great personalized content for who they are and where they are in the life cycle with your company. They're now a customer, right? Surveys, incredibly important. Events, incredibly important, as is social monitoring. In a world where machine learning and AI seem to influence everything, your strategy can no longer afford to just be the hunches from your highest paid person in the organization, the hippo, highest paid person's opinion, or highest paid person in the organization. Just because they come in and say, my granddaughter says we should do more on TikTok, doesn't mean that TikTok is the right channel for you. So what can we do now with a data-backed approach? And as I've talked about throughout this 3-day training event, as the third-party cookie becomes less and less of a part of the tech stack of marketing and sales tech tool, marketing and technology stacks across the entire data center ecosystem, this becomes a little more challenging. But to have insightful conversations with your CFOs and your boards and your investors, you need to get your handle. You need to get a handle around some of this data. So what can you do? Like your best clients, buyer personas, and their data dictate a little bit about what's going on. So closed loop reporting means that you know with a strong degree of certainty which of your sales acceleration, which of your lead generation efforts have led to the most clients being closed. And this allows you to shift your resources from underperforming to overperforming efforts. In other words, do more of what's working and less of what's not. So you can continue to improve your results over time, of course, until the competition figures out, and then there's no room for procrastination with all of this. The cautionary note with all of this is the classical digital attribution technology is soon becoming sunsetted. Apple's already killed it off a couple of years ago. Google and Alphabet was talking about sunsetting it last year. They keep giving it a little bit more life. But we know, whether it's regulation, whether it's privacy zealots, we know for sure that the days of being able to lean 100% on third-party cookies for attribution are coming rapidly to a close. As an interesting side note, while all of this was happening, LinkedIn actually built some tools into its campaign manager tool to anticipate what was going on and allow you to kind of track some of these micro interactions to better target mid and late life cycle stage ads if you start to get into advanced usage of LinkedIn ads. But none of this addresses dark social, where people attend a webinar, watch a podcast, hear about something in social, and that causes them to run a Google search of the company name or the individual name. Search gets credit, but the reality is search isn't what originates at search, just is standing there at the cash register and intercepting the credits. So yeah, it's definitely more complicated than it's been in the past. When it comes to measuring what's working and what's not. It's a combination of talent, technology, and strategy. If you skip or underinvest in any of these areas, if you go cheap on talent, if you go cheap on technology tools, if you go cheap on strategy, it's not going to work out well to give you what you need to be competitive. But what you should end up with is, if you're paying attention to what's going on, you have some unit economics that you should be able to track in your CRM. You have your buyer personas that you should be able to track in your CRM. So you may be able to arrive at figuring out, when it comes to your primary point of contact being a technology person versus a finance person versus a compliance person, how much that client is worth to you over the lifetime of their relationship with your company. So you fill in the data. How much it costs to acquire a client like that when you take your fully loaded amortized marketing and sales investments, and you fill in your data, and you look at your average sales cycle length, or what you believe the average sales cycle length is, if you truly believe you're in there for 100% of the buyer's journey. That's a big topic that we've talked about in Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart, is a lot of times you believe your sales cycle is actually considerably shorter than it actually is. The reality is, most of the time, the reason that you might see a short sales cycle is because they only came to you when someone else called all the shots about what the purchase criteria was. And the only reason you're winning is because you completely destroyed your profit margins to undercut on price, which we know, of course, is not a sustainable strategy. So once you get this data under control, you may discover that the best lifetime value is not necessarily the best client. And there are complex answers with all this. Sometimes the best value at a top line isn't the best at the bottom line. Your cost of acquisition may be too high. Your average sales cycle length may be too long. But again, these are great data-related conversations to pull together with your head of sales, with your CEO, with your head of finance, with your investors and board members, to at least talk about these issues. I will give you a cautionary note with all of this, is that there's two things that tend to kill initiatives like this more than pretty much anything else. This is what I call living in the past. This is where you're severely underinvested in these kinds of initiatives, and the right people are not weighing in, and these things are being handled at too low level in the organization. And because of that, everyone is fighting over who gets credits and backstabbing, and there's a lot. How do you get your marketplace to trust you if you don't trust your internal stakeholders? So that needs to be addressed at a C level, and the lack of CEO level buy-in for these changes that need to happen. And again, as we've talked about throughout the 3-day training event, if your company is fewer than a few hundred employees, these kinds of culture changes where you're drawing a line in the sand and saying, going forward, we're tired of being marginalized. We're tired of being called last. We're tired of being shoved into the vendor box. We're tired of our client-facing team members being treated like crap. We're smarter than everyone else. We need to let the world know about that. And going forward, it is our mission, one of our core values, that we're going to be seen as the be-all, end-all, go-to experts in our space. And we're going to make significant investments going forward to own 100% of the buyer's journey, to show up early and often in the right places at the right time for the right people, and most of all, in the right context. So our entire client-facing team is seen as consultants, trusted advisors, teachers, subject matter experts, and thought leaders. So what is your biggest takeaway when it comes to how to find the right data center niches and avoid commoditization? Let me know in the chat pane. So that brings us to the end of day 3 of Data Center Go-to-Market 2025 Jumpstart. If you have any remaining questions that we didn't have time to address during this 3-day training event, feel free to drop those into the Q&A pane, and I'll try to get to as many of those possible live. And if there's any that we're unable to get to, we will reach out to you in our follow-ups. So to recap, during day 1, we started with Data Center Go-to-Market 101. We gave you the foundations of the most important areas to be thinking about with building your go-to-market playbook, building your go-to-market strategy for what you're going to do going forward. Then we talked about the importance of rethinking your sales playbook. Data center sales has changed as your team living in the past. And then we wrapped up day 1 by talking about how to market and sell specifically to technology executives, to CTOs and CIOs. In day 2, we talked about lead generation. We spent the entire day on lead generation because we know when we ask you about what you're struggling with most, the overwhelming majority of the people in the DCSMI ecosystem across operators, technology companies, facilities companies, construction and real estate companies, even outsourced sales and marketing companies, they all struggle with lead generation. And it doesn't matter whether you work in marketing, sales, account management, product, channel partnerships, or the executive team, everyone needs more great leads. That's why we spent an entire day on lead generation 101, lead generation 201, how to get to decision makers and larger sales, and some of the advanced strategies in data center lead generation 301. And today, day 3, data center go-to-market 2025 Jumpstart, we talked about 5 ways to close sales faster with your data center leads, as well as how to find the right data center niches, potatoes, how to find the right data center niches and avoid commoditization. We're committed over at DCSMI to helping to elevate the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry so that you, your team, and your company can capitalize on the enormous opportunities that are in front of all of us in data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. Again, I'm Joshua Feinberg. If we are not currently connected on LinkedIn, feel free to send me a LinkedIn connection invite. Just mention that you're on the series and I'd love to be connected with you. If you have an idea for a guest that we should have on an upcoming episode of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, feel free to email me, feel free to message me through LinkedIn, and feel free to introduce me to someone. We can't guarantee we can get to all of them, but if you feel that they're a strong guest who could add a lot of value to the podcast, we'd love to get them in the consideration queue. And we look forward to hearing your success stories about you doing great things to continue to grow your business in 2025. Let us know how we can help.